Welcome everybody to this webinar that we are doing with SIMBA and RSK. My name is Dulce Villarreal. I am the developer advocate for RSK and RIF. And today I have with me Tommy and Anjon. I'm gonna let the floor to these guys and to introduce themselves. Can you start, Tommy, please?
Sure. My name is Tommy Cooksey. I'm a trainer for SIMBA Chain. I teach about our blockchain architecture and the ease of use of the tool and how you could use it with your existing workflows or possibly build something new if you'd like to.
Thanks, Tommy. I'm Anjan Roy. I'm a Vice President of Market Development here at SIMBA Chain, and very excited here to present with Tommy to the RSK community. We are enthusiastic of supporting your platform and engaging with your community and your supporters, and we hope you find this useful.
Yeah, we are super excited about this webinar and to show to our developers how they can use RSK and SIMBA. And sometimes, you know, we are in a hackathon, we need to do a fast MVP, and we can use SIMBA. It's a perfect combination. I'm going to start just a super quick introduction about what is RSK, and then Anton and Tommy are going to talk. Like, you know, RSK is a side chain of Bitcoin because we believe Bitcoin is the most secure cryptocurrency. And RSK is the first open source smart contract platform secured by the Bitcoin network. What that means, like secured by the Bitcoin network, what that means is that miners are validating RSK transaction. And nowadays, we have between 50 to 60% of the miners validating transactions, RSK transactions, with the same software. And if you have a node, a Bitcoin node in your house, you also can run an RSK node without any cost. The goal of RSK is to add functionality and value to the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's kind of give superpowers to Bitcoin through smart contract, near instant payments, and higher scalability. How it works with a two-way peg. What happened is Sergio Lerner was one of the co-founders of RSK, but also he was auditor of few blockchains such as an Ethereum, and he realized he can take the Ethereum Java machine to create the virtual machine for RSK. And then basically it's totally compatible or 90% compatible with Ethereum because it's the origin. But one of the benefits is like it's 6 times faster than Ethereum, and also is one of the good things as entrepreneurs and business person is like it's affordable. You can check that in our website too. How it works, basically, the two-way peg is you have Bitcoin in the blockchain Bitcoin, and then in order to pass to the RSK blockchain, you lock in the main chain the information, the crypto, and you unlock in the side chain. Basically, is how it works. We don't create more tokens. It's like basically the same tokens. Is going to be exactly the same 21 millions. Basically, it's like a game. What you have here, you don't have in the other chain. But it's like a mirror, I would like to say. And one Bitcoin is the same to a smart Bitcoin. What are the benefits? The benefits is that you can, as a developer, you can Solidity. It's fully compatible with Ethereum virtual machine. It's faster than Bitcoin and Ethereum. The low cost fee it's amazing. And like I say, it's secured by the Bitcoin network. Having said that, I'm going to let the floor to our partners, SIMBA.
Sure. I'll go ahead and share out our slideshow here, and then I think Anjan is going to handle the first, actually, hold on a second. Let me change my, oops, there we go. And we'll share out the screen here. Okay, so on talk to the first couple of slides here, and then I'll get into some of the more technical stuff. So, here's our first slide.
All right, thank you, Tommy, and thank you, Dulce. So SIMBA stands for Simpler Blockchain Applications. And so our mission statement, our raison d'etre, our reason for existence, is to make blockchain easy, accessible, and lower the barriers for adoption and value for everybody. And so, the North Star that we use is to bring blockchain to people who have no blockchain experience. Ideally, that means even people who may not be developers, who are maybe they have concepts, they have ideas, they have work ethic, they're builders. They're not necessarily developers. How do we get them building on blockchain? How do we get them contributing to the community? How do we get them to realize the potential from their ideas? That's who we're aiming to address. That's who we're aiming to help as SIMBA Chain, is to give everybody that democratize not just blockchain, but to do so in a way that is easy and increases time to value, time to market for anybody. No blockchain experience necessary, and that's really the kind of the real takeaway with what SIMBA is bringing to the table, and what our North Star is. So thanks, Tommy. Next slide.
Would you mind just speaking? I didn't put a slide together for this, but would you mind speaking a little bit about maybe what the roots of where SIMBA came from?
Sure. Thanks, Tommy. Our roots are from the research, the university and research community, as well as the manufacturing space. SIMBA came as a spinoff from two entities. One is Itamco, which is a local manufacturing firm in northern Indiana. And and I know this is a very global audience, and RSK is, you have a lot of your stakeholders are in Latin America and in Europe. And so Indiana is in the northern part of the US, and this is from the northern part of Indiana. And it's very close to Notre Dame University, which is a very famous university. Actually, I understand it's quite famous in Latin America as well. So the Center for Research Computing at Notre Dame and a local manufacturing firm called Itamco came together, and they applied for a research grant with DARPA, an agency of the U.S. government that funds a lot of basic research. This was DARPA's first or second ever blockchain research grant that they put together back in 2016. And just for context, DARPA is the same agency that did some of the early basic research for autonomous vehicles, for even the supercomputing research that led to the creation of the internet. And if you even go further back to the mid-20th century, the predecessor to DARPA actually funded the original research that led to the first computer switch at Bell Labs in New Jersey. So there's a pedigree of research, that this type of kind of blue sky research and basic research that DARPA funds. And blockchain is one of the things they're looking at. And a few years ago, in their first ever solicitation, SIMBA Chain applied for that, where it was prior to SIMBA Chain existing, and they won it. And that was around secured instant messaging using blockchain technology. And so due to the success of that, Itamco and Notre Dame decided to take that project, spin it off into its own company, and also take the work from that project and productize it. Because the team that got together and they said, look, to be able to create a blockchain from scratch, it's really hard. It's way too hard than it needs to be. So why don't we take what we built and have that be the beginnings of what has become the SIMBA stack? And so, the company was born, its roots are in 2016, was born in 2017. And the SIMBA platform, the first time I saw it was in 2017, and it has come a long way since then. But the mission has been consistent. And that is, SIMBA Chain makes blockchain easy.
And so with that being said, I think what I'll do is kind of just drill into some of these more technical aspects, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So when we look at this first slide here, what we see is that, just kind of building on what Anjan was talking about there, we see that what we're trying to do is try to create an environment for an individual developer, so that they don't have to focus on building out the blockchain stuff. So all of the undifferentiated heavy lifting, the DevOps work that you might have to do in order to be able to build out a blockchain application, we try to take a lot of that away for you, so that you can still have a standard development environment that you're used to using, a standard REST-based API that you can build out your front-end environment to, and then still be storing persistent data in a blockchain, whether that data be on a public chain, where the data is actually stored on chain, or if you choose chain and then just put a bundle hash or a hashed index on chain. So where we'll take that data set, run it through a hash algorithm, use the index of that, put that as a thumbprint on chain, and then you can reference that as part of your application workflow. So that's kind of what our concept is. And really what you have to do is you have to be able to come in and understand your business process. So you have to have a good understanding of that, and you should be able to build out a blockchain application pretty quickly. And so with that being said, let's see. With that being said, one of the things that you can do is you can go in and you can build what we consider rapid blockchain development. So that proof of concept, like Dulce was talking about earlier, we're able to go to just a couple of hours, days, or maybe even months to build out a full product, compared to what it might have been years or even decades possibly to build a product to market. So our goal is to kind of bridge that gap. And so before we actually go in and look at the tool, let's kind of take a look at where we came from and where we might be going. And so what I've done in this slide here, and I think that this is really just at a high level, I want to kind of explain what a full tier web architecture might look like, and then how that web architecture might, I'm getting a little feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but anyway, so where that web architecture might come from. So the front end piece, if we think about the front end of your web architecture is going to be your web server. And so that web server is going to be the place where your forms are coming in. It's going to be the location where the user's interacting with your application. Then that usually hands off to some type of a middle tier. That middle tier is usually where we make decisions on what's going on and what came in from that front end form. And then the back end is usually where we want to have some type of persistent storage. And so my goal here, and I think most of us on this call have some technical understanding of this stack. And so my goal is to kind of to teach you or to show you a little bit of where we think that a lot of that disruption is going to occur and where a blockchain is going to fit in for maybe an existing workflow that might fit in this model. And so a lot of existing workflows that we deal with in any kind of web data have this kind of a model. So we can kind of figure out, well, how can we deal with this? And so what's driving this a lot of times is what we consider Web 3.0 or the Industry 4.0. And fourth industrial revolution. So to kind of review what that is, we'll kind of take a look at that too here in this slide. So let's just step back and think about what was Web 1, what's Web 2, and what's Web 3, and what might drive making a modification to that traditional model. And so Web 1 was our ability to simply digest data. So I could put some information up as a bulletin board. You could come and retrieve that information. And that was pretty much how Web 1 worked. And Web 2, what happened was social media and YouTube and Facebook and things like that made it very, very easy for us to be our own publishers. So we didn't have to become a web developer. That lifting that was involved was removed so that we didn't have to do that. And then we could actually take advantage of producing data on the web, right? And so that really created, our grandmother was creating a Facebook page, right? So that was Web 2. Now Web 3, I think, is being driven where we want to own that data, because now we're putting it in a centralized location where anyone can own the data that we're publishing on the web, right? So that Facebook data belongs to Mark Zuckerberg, or that that YouTube video belongs to the Google folks. So we want to be able to own our data, and because that data has an inherent value. And so what we need to do is we need to make some modifications to that. And I think that's what's driving Web 3. And those modifications, generally speaking, are in this back-end data space, right? And so when we think of our persistent storage set, that persistent storage set traditionally was in a relational database model. But that relational database model had some pain points, right? And so we see people going to NoSQL or going to a graph database, or maybe even going to a directed acyclic graph or something like that, or maybe a distributed ledger or some type of immutable ledger or a blockchain. But generally speaking, if we understand what a blockchain is, all blockchains are distributed ledgers, but not all distributed ledgers are blockchains, right? And so we need to kind of understand that concept, I guess. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to define where is the data going to be stored. And so that data, we need to look at that data, the structural data that is defining the structure of our application. That data needs to be ephemeral. And so when we say ephemeral, what we're saying is it just goes back to the state that it's in whenever it gets reset. That state doesn't really change. It's the core things that make the operating system run. And so that could be things like we would have in our smart contract, auto execution of logic of our business logic, right? And so that auto execution of that business logic is really going to be modified. That structural data is going to be more ephemeral. And then that contextual data, those individual transactions that occur inside of there, we want to have ownership of that data somehow, and then provide that ownership maybe when it has inherent value. And so that is where we need to kind of reevaluate where this data is going to be stored and where it's going to get referenced. And so that's when the blockchain comes in. Okay, so now that we understand the value of a blockchain, just generally speaking, we're going to also see some interruption here on these other layers, the front end and the middle tier. The front end, that's the web server, right? And so the web server, what's the pain points there? Thumbs and screens, right? So you don't want to use your thumb to interact with something. You don't want to, the screen is, there's ambiguity. There's problems with getting your intentions discovered by the interface. And so how can we fix those problems? We can fix them by doing ubiquitous computing. We can do alternate reality. We can do virtual reality so that it's not a screen, it's more of a complete environment for you to work in. What about the middle tier, where that standard analytic algorithm that you had is going to be replaced with machine learning, with artificial intelligence. We're going to have different ways to modify that static algorithm as the data changes, right? So this entire stack is going to get interrupted. And so what we as developers and engineers and architects and IT professionals is we have to be ready to be able to stand on the railroad tracks and be ready for that train when it comes, right? So how can we do that? How can we best position ourselves? Is going to be through tools and through good tooling. And so what SIMBA's tried to do is try to provide you with the best tooling that we think that you can use in order to be prepared for starting building out onto that immutable data set. And so we've focused on leveraging RSK because as we think, is if we look at Bitcoin, that's going to be, the most anonymous blockchain that is in the world, right? And so we can all probably say that, after 10 years, it's no longer in beta, even though it hasn't really reached version 1.0. It's still probably where we can get the most hardness, right? We can get the most anonymity, decentralization. And so if those are things we want in our architecture, then we might need to tie to that. So RSK is a perfect partner for us to be able to use in order to be able to put that smart contract logic on top of it that you can do with the Ethereum virtual machine. Because if you're familiar with Bitcoin, what it was is it was very limited to just about 12, 13, I think it's 16 different scripts that you can run that are function calls that'll make modifications to the data set. And so if you wanted to build out on top of that, it's very limited. So you can't really do that. But with the Ethereum virtual machine and the way that RSK is doing it, we're able to do that. And so now we're able to tie to that strength of the Bitcoin blockchain, which is amazing. So what we envision that the data that you're going to be storing is going to be characterized as either something that you're going to consider an asset, which would be more like a noun, and then that asset, as modifications or state changes occur to that asset, then those would be considered the transactions. And so what we do is we just kind of build out in that type of a model where we define the assets and the transactions. So as an example, a machine component could move through a manufacturer through completion certificate and sign off for that particular component. And all of that component could be the asset. And then as it moves from the certification from the manufacturer before it gets shipped out to the customer, we have Provenance that, that third party certifier actually validated that part met industry standard specifications. And so everybody involved has done everything that they're supposed to do, and it's done in an automated manner. So we can we can do that in a blockchain. Food could move through, and we could know everything that's going on. We want to know what we're putting into our bodies. We want to know where that stuff's coming from. We want to know everything about it. And so if we want to know how many steps the chicken has taken that we're about ready to eat, we can find that out. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about that in our demo today. We also want to know the details of the domain and what business that we're dealing with. So again, what we're doing is we're just looking at assets and transactions. We want to know the time, location, the participants, who's working with the stuff. And all of this is about the modeling of these business processes. And it's really going to be the business professional that probably knows that business process better than anyone. But what we need to do is we need to generate a smart contract. Well, what SIMBA does is it allows the business professional to simply just say, here's the asset. Here's the key value pairs that I'm going to use to define that asset. And I'm going to draw out with arrows what that business model is going to look like. And you're going to get the code in the back end. Now, is that code going to be hardened? Is it going to meet governance standards? No. You're still going to go through your standard auditing process, still go through your standard governance process for whatever type of data that you're dealing with. But what you do have is you have a proof of concept in literally just a very short period of time. So what we do is we just choose, you figure out what network you want to use, and it builds it out. So let's go out and take a look. We're going to do a demo, and then we'll come back here to some of these slides. So I'm going to open up. What I've done here is I've just went out to app.simbachain.com, and I'll go ahead and log out, and so you guys can see what that looks like. But if you go out here to app.simbachain.com, you can sign up for a new account, and we actually do have a free tier. So if you want to get started and not spend really any money just to play around with this, you're able to do that with our free tier. And so you can do that off the sign up tab. So if I go ahead and click on sign in, I've already created my account, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and get signed in here. And once I get signed in, what you're going to notice is it's going to present me with this really nice dashboard. Now, this dashboard, there's going to be three real key areas that we're going to look at today. Up here in the upper right, we're going to notice this little icon, a little head icon up here. That's where our account information is. We're going to take a look at some stuff there. In addition to that, over on the left, over here in kind of what we consider our menu area, that section is going to have really two distinct areas that we're going to be spending on some time talking about. Sure. Yeah, we'll make this bigger. How's that? Let's see. Better? Yep. Cool. So what we can do over here on the left-hand side is in the application section, we can go in and we can manage any applications that we're building. And then we can also build out our smart contract, either on the Stellar or any Ethereum virtual machine based blockchains, which would be using the Solidity smart contract language underneath. And so that's what we see here. And that's, of course, also what RSK is doing. So that's what allows us to be integrated with RSK. So we're going to go ahead and start over here on the right-hand side again, where I see my account. And the first thing that I want to show you is I have these things called organizations. This one happens to be called webinar. And in there, I can come in and I can invite others to be involved with this project with me. So if I'm not the only developer working on this, if I'm not the only business professional working on this, there's lots of hands in the pot. We can all be working on the same product at the same time, which is very helpful. And then in addition to that, you also will notice down here, we have this thing called blockchain wallets. Now, if you've worked with RSK before, I'm sure that you've probably had to go in and fund your wallet. And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to minimize the Web3 MetaMask workload that you might have to integrate with. We have a full Web3 compatible web-based browser or browser-based wallet that you can fund if you're on a public chain, or it integrates with any private chains that you might want to use that are EVM based. We also have one for Stellar as well. So this is where you would go to fund it. And so since we're dealing with RSK, we're going to go into the RSK testnet. And then interestingly enough, what you'll notice is if we want to fund our wallet, all we have to do is come over here and select deposit. And then we have a shortcut to the wallet, or to the faucet, excuse me. And then I just need to copy my wallet address and then just paste that in here to get, and then verify my CAPTCHA to get some free rootstock or RSK or RSBTC. And so this is what's going to allow me. And so now it's going to take about 30 seconds. And that's like what Dulce was talking about earlier is RSK has an amazing block time. The block times are very, very fast. So we can get consensus throughout the network in just a very short amount of time so that we can verify transactions and we can have more throughput. So that's really kind of cool. So anyway, once that's done, then we'll see that our balance will go up. I've already preloaded this wallet, so you'll see a balance here already. All right, so that makes that nice and easy for you. If you wanted to create a new wallet, you could go in and generate another wallet, and then that would be just another seed wallet. You can even import a wallet if you wanted to, if you have the seed phrase. So if you wanted to restore with the seed phrase, you could just name it, put in your mnemonic phrase, which would be those 12 words that you use for any HD-based wallet, and it would be able to import that wallet for you. All right, so HD stands for heuristic or hierarchical deterministic, which just means that those 12 words are the root of all the keys that are generated from the wallet. So, so with math, we can determine that the data came from the same derivatives. Okay, so now that we understand that concept, let's go in and let's take a look at how are we going to build our smart contract. So as I mentioned before, if I want to come in and just create a new smart contract, all I got to do is click new smart contract, and then I come in here and say a new asset. And let's say if I want to create an asset for a student. And so if I have a student and I want to get a transaction for that student, so my student got enrolled, enrollment, then I can go ahead and I can just create that. And that'd be pretty easy where I can just create a transaction, a student. And if I click on my student, I can come in and this little thing that says add parameter. What I'm able to do is I'm able to come in and I'm able to define the data primitive type of any attribute that I want to keep track of. And it's what we call its key value pair. And so I have to put in just basically its key value. So for instance, here, if I want to keep track of the student's last name, and then also I want to keep track of the student's, let's say, for instance, student ID. And then what if I wanted to also keep some data off chain, maybe some grade data that I don't want it. I don't want that have that data at all on any kind of public blockchain at all, period. And so I'm going to keep that completely off chain. And so I'm going to put that in off-chain storage through that bundle hash concept that I talked about. So what it's doing here is it's creating a string value that's going to run through that hashing algorithm, any data that you decide to upload through an exposed API that allows you to upload to IPFS, to Ceph, or to an Azure Blob Store. So you can do like an Azure Blob Store, you can do an S3 bucket, or you could do IPFS, which would be a decentralized storage network. So really, we allow you to integrate with any of those. All right, so now that we kind of understand this basic concept, then after I've built that out, then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw my relationships. So, you know, a student's going to have an enrollment, right? And so after I do that, what's happening behind the scenes is it's actually automatically generating all of this code. So the code's getting generated behind the scenes for me as I build this out. So let's go out and take a look at one maybe a little bit more complicated. And this is one that we were working at a little bit earlier this week. It's kind of fun because if you've ever eaten MRE, so I was a Marine in the United States Marine Corps. And so as a Marine, we'd eat these little bagged food that you would have to eat when you go camping, right? And so go camping, I guess that's what we'd do when we'd go out in the field. And so so those meals would always have peanut butter in them, and they would always have Tabasco sauce. So let's assume that we need to track all of the food that's going into our fighting force. That's probably pretty important. We need to know where that food came from. We need to know everything about it. If I want to know how many steps the chicken has taken that you are eating in your chicken a la king before he decided to sacrifice his life to the MRE gods, then we can tell you that information, right? And so all we have to do is start capturing it and then recording it, and then you'll be able to actually read that information as a soldier and say, okay, well, this is what my chicken's life was like before I eat it, if that's the type of data that you're willing to share. So we can track it. And so the goal here is to show you what that workflow might look like. So here we have a Tabasco supplier. We got their bundle hash, which would be any additional information about their supplier. So all we're doing is just putting a supplier ID up there, and then anything that supplier is going to claim, then we can reference that hash, and then that hash would go back to the data from the supplier. So pretty simple. Then we have our manufacturer. Then after we've manufactured some MREs, we're going to ship them, send them out to our carrier. The carrier is going to send them out to a logistic depot, and then the Marines or the sailors or the soldiers are going to come and pick them up, right? And so that's pretty easy. It seems pretty simple, but you may not understand this workflow if you've never been involved, right? This might be complete foreign to you. So as a developer, if you're just a coder, that's not going to make any sense. Maybe it makes sense to you once you've walked through it, but if you've never, eaten an MRE, then you probably don't understand this. So the goal is to give that business professional this canvas to build out that business process, to build out that workflow. And then behind the scenes, you have all of this code that's getting generated for you. So all of your solidity that you need in order to build out the smart contract is auto-generated. So it helps remove a lot of that ambiguity when you're ready to move from just general wireframing to actual coding. You're gonna be able to have a much better understanding of what that code intention should look like. Now you'll still may want to go back and check with that business professional, make sure you got it right before you start building in additional functionality into your contract and stuff like that. But generally speaking, you got a really great jump off point to start with that you probably didn't have before. And you don't have to have a whole team of developers. Maybe only have to have one or two that actually have to understand Solidity before you can get started. So that's pretty awesome. And you don't even have to know Solidity to get started. You could just build it out. You don't like what I'll show you in a second. You don't have to know any code. And so now we've built this out. The next thing that I want to do is I want to build an application on top of it. So if I come up here to application, here I see this thing that says MRE chain. This is one that I've already built. Now I'm going to show this one to you, but before I show it to you, we'll go ahead and go through the process of building out an application on top of the smart contract that we were just looking at. And then we'll come in and look at the one that's already built because it's already got some data in there. And so if I come in here and I just say, hey, I want to use RSK as my blockchain, and then it's going to be the testnet, which we've already funded our wallet, and then my off-chain file storage. So remember, we have that block hash data, and where are you going to store that data at? And so what's going to be the data set? And so here we're going to put it into IPFS, but again, you could use Ceph as well. And so that's what we see here. So I'm going to go ahead and use IPFS, and then it's going to ask me which smart contract do I want to use. I'm going to use that MRE chain that we were just looking at, and then I need to name it. So we're going to call this RSK MREs, and then RSK MREs, and then we just click continue. And then what's happening is this is the actual REST-based API that gets exposed. So it's getting exposed through the SIMBA Chain application, and you're getting an API that's going to have this that you're going to be able to do puts and pull or puts and gets for any function calls that you're exposing in your smart contract. So we're going to go ahead and click deploy. Then we come in here and we say, okay, here's my account. So this is the account we funded earlier, and I got to unlock my wallet. So I just got to put in my password here. And then after I've done that, then I just click deploy, and you'll notice here what it's doing is it's going through, it's compiling my smart contract, it's signing my transactions, it's deploying the smart contract out onto the rootstock testnet for me so that I can start working with it. I can start interacting with that smart contract. I can start using that as that logic for my data that I need to send through, right? So my transactional data, right? So that's That's kind of what we're talking about at the beginning. Okay, cool. So now that we understand that, if we come up here and we look at this application that we just built, well, what do we build? Well, if I'm the business professional, I'm going to want it to look not so techy, right? So the first thing that we see here, you'll notice that you have your API and you got your API keys and your logs. I'm going to go in and show you that in a second. But first, I want to show you this method call section, because this is going to be more where the business professional is going to come in here and they're just going to be able to interact with this smart contract. So if they wanted to create a new carrier, they can come in and put in the carrier ID, whatever DLA depot that carrier is associated with, what their account number is. If they have any off-chain data, they could upload the file, and then they could just call that onto the blockchain. So if I come in here and I say, carrier is FedEx, DLA depot is in Barstow, and their account number is 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we can just upload a file. Let's say it's just my PowerPoint, and then I have to pay for this. So one of the things about a blockchain, if we're not familiar with this, is anytime you're writing data, you have to pay for transactions. When you're reading data from a public chain, it's free. So since I'm writing data, I got to go ahead and pay for that. So it's going to go ahead and write this to the blockchain. So that's what we see here. It's just going to head and writing this new carrier. Then that transaction got submitted. And so here you'll see that the transaction hash hasn't been mined yet. So I don't have a transaction hash yet, but it's submitted. It's out in the mempool waiting to get mined, right? And so if I look over here on the right-hand side and I look at all of this more info, this is what we call our transaction log. You could also find a shortcut of this off of the application menu. But this is where I can see all of these transactions. So the very first transaction that I created was when I just created the smart contract. So this was my smart contract compiled down into bytecode, just like you would see in Remix or in any other tool that you were using, Truffle, whatever that you use in order to compile. But you don't have to learn that stuff, right? You just use our little IDE and you can build this out, right? It's pretty awesome. And then here's your receipt. So then here's where I deployed a Tabasco supplier. So I called the method for the Tabasco supplier, and then here was the raw data that got sent in. It came in from this address. Here's how much it cost me in gas. And here's sending it to my smart contract address. And then what did I send in? Well, I said, okay, it was an LA farmer. It was manufacturer 311. It was Tabasco supplier, this Tabasco supplier. And they uploaded some data, and then that data give me a bundle hash, which is just a thumbprint of that data, so that that data that they uploaded ever changes, then I can reference that. So that's the bundle hash for whatever the transaction was that they just uploaded that bundle hash for. So maybe it's a shipment bundle hash, whatever. But that's all the manifest information about what was recorded. All right, so now we can kind of see that raw data there. Now, that gets a little techy, which is fine. And so generally speaking, though, the important thing to remember is that this method call section is designed for that business user to be able to come in here and they can interact with this. They can come in and they can look at the functions that have been exposed, and they can interact with the smart contract immediately. So as Dulce had mentioned earlier, we can go to proof of concept just like that. Less than an hour, we've built out a proof of concept for tracking an MRE. And so now I got all this cool data over here that I can use. But what if I'm a front end developer and I want to build out my front end better than what you just showed me, because that front end is a little clunky, right? So as a front end developer, we're going to want to interact with the API. So what we can do is we can come in here and generate an API key, and I can say, okay, this is my RSK dev team, and RSK, not RDK, RSK dev team, and generate them some API keys, and then I'll distribute their API keys out to them securely. And then once we've done that, then they can come in and they'll be able to go into this exposed Swagger documentation, or the Swagger API, which is the exposed API, and they can authorize access to this tool using their API key. After they've done that, then they can go ahead and interact with these function calls that have been exposed. They can come in and do a get for maybe all the transactions that have occurred with this smart contract. And so if they wanted to do that, then they can come in here and say, okay, I want to try this out. I want to see every smart contract transaction that's occurred. And so if I come down here and I just say execute this, look what happens. It's going to go ahead and build my curl request. It's plugging in the API keys that I'm supposed to use. It's submitting it to the exposed API that it's supposed to submit it to, and it's getting the returned result. So I see my return code. So if it's a 403 or if it's a 404, then I know it didn't find something or it doesn't have permissions. If it's a 200, then there's the data, right? And so we can start really building out that front end environment so that it actually works with our existing workloads, right? So this is what you need. You need an exposed API so that you can start retrofitting an existing workload with what you already have, right? So now you start popping the hood on your JavaScript and you start building this in, or however you need to integrate. But this is from a front end perspective. This is a tool set you're going to need in order to be able to do that, and we give it to you. And so then, that's the Swagger. And so then when we come back here and we look, we also have all this app info. And so another cool thing that we have, and I'll show this again when we go, we're getting a little short on time, so I want to give time for questions. But we also have this spot here where we can actually integrate to Azure. And so in Azure, in Azure Workbench, you can actually query your smart contract data so that you can get aggregate reports and you can start to have real-time notifications about certain things that have happened on your blockchain and stuff like that. So do more of a pub/sub type architecture. So a lot of really fun stuff that you can do with that, and you can start building out on top of your application. But again, what our focus is to try to make it simple, so that you can easily create what you want without having to go and learn how mining works, without having to go and learn how every different blockchain works before you can get your first line of code written. And so we want you to be able to start figuring out, does this work for you first? If it doesn't, then maybe you can fail fast and then go back and retrofit. So it's more of an agile type workflow, but I think it works well for next generation web applications. So with that being said, I want to go back to a couple of slides here. So I think we kind of covered this pretty good. We talked about the smart contracts, talked about how you can have your data bundles and your events. Events are where we can capture what's going on through your API, so we can trigger events and then have publish things happening, or trigger an alarm or something like that, have something happen, and kind of chain things together. We talked about the API. We also talked about off-chaining data and how that off-chain data goes into a bundle hash, and then how the REST-based API gets generated for you, and then how you can interact with that with your posts and gets. And so again, the concept was we try to integrate and make everything as easy as possible. We also have our smart contract SCAS service, which again is that Azure Workbench offering that we have available to you, and we'd be happy to help you get started with that as well. So why does it work? It's easy to use, rapid development. There's lots of use cases. I don't know if we really got an opportunity to talk about this too much when we got started, but we have a little bit of time at the end here if Anjan wants to speak about this. But we have a lot of various different contracts with the Department of Defense here in the United States, as well as in Latin America. We have contracts with Tokes, which is a very large restaurant supply chain there in Mexico. So I'll let him speak to that a little bit, but you can go out to our GitHub repository and take a look at the actual source code of that. You can also go to our homepage, look at our documentations, and we actually have a demo where you can actually see the front end of a car application, where you can buy a car, you can sell a car, you can see the car data and put that data onto a blockchain. And you can see the front end application that's been built out for that. As well as you can go out to the GitHub repo and see the source code for that. So with that being said, what kind of questions do we have?
Thanks, Tommy. And no, that was great. I will defer to our RSK colleagues, and if there are questions coming in, I don't see any at the moment, but perhaps.
Yeah, I have questions.
Oh,
Yeah,
you do?
I think. Yeah. First of all, thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Anjon. It was an amazing presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I have a question. Like, as an entrepreneur, a developer, that you are an entrepreneur, sometimes like I have this idea of supply chain. I have this idea. What would be the best roadmap or the best path to take to start a collaboration with SIMBA and RSK? Let's say I have the idea, I have the business, now I just want to use SIMBA and RSK together. What are your recommendations?
Well, you can. We can absolutely reach out to us. Somebody from our team, from both of our teams, will be very happy to work with you. We can talk to you about what your use case is. Tommy himself can kind of walk through a demo of the tool. And there's others in the company that we can certainly engage, and obviously RSK, your community as well. So. Absolutely, we are open to enterprises. We are also open to startups building on our platform. We believe that there's a great value proposition to startups of this platform if they want to use SIMBA and RSK together. We may be in the process of. In fact, we're getting a lot of interest from startups very recently. So. Absolutely, we work with startups. There are different manners by which we can help a startup get to market. And would love to help them do that and use use RSK's protocol and work with you.
Thank you so much. Do you want to add something, Tommy, to this answer?
I don't have much to add to that other than, yeah, we are certainly here to support you guys as much as we possibly can. And if you have questions, obviously I put my email address there. But generally speaking, reaching out to us in any of our open forums is a great way to just kind of get started. And I think Anjan pretty much kind of covered that. One other thing that I did want to mention, I did see the question about the presentation. I believe that we are making a recording to that, so that will be available once the recording is posted. So I think you had mentioned that Dulce, that you would make that available.
Yeah, totally. After we finish this webinar, it's going to be available in our YouTube channel. And also, if SIMBA want to post it in any of their social media, it's totally on them. But it's going to be in our YouTube channel for sure. In the playlist of English, we have different playlists, different language. You can see there.
Yeah, I see Daniel is asking a really great question. He's asking if in Swagger if we can use a hash like an ENS name instead of using a long hashing algorithm. I would have to defer to our dev team to see if we support like using an ENS name service instead of the hashing algorithm. But I think that wouldn't be a big lift if it was something that was a requirement for more of an enterprise type application. I'm sure that if it's something that you needed, we might be able to talk with the dev team to try to get that done if possible. If not, we can certainly let you know. But I'm not sure if that's something that we can do currently. I would have to ask our dev team. So I apologize. I don't have an answer right away.
Great question, Daniel. Also, you can write down to Tommy, and maybe he can put in contact with the other developers.
Yep,
I have a question. What is the process to add another decentralized storage? Like if let's see, there is a company that is working in other, like such as Saya or Swarm. What is the process for this company to be in SIMBA solution?
Well, it would really depend on the level of level of market interest. The off-chaining choices that we support now have been driven by customer interest or market interest. So, we support several of the major players right now. If there was an interest in others being able to support that, certainly if there was a project that we could utilize to fund it, we're absolutely open to it. We are architecturally as well as strategically agnostic as far as that goes. So we're certainly open to supporting other protocols. Obviously, as a commercial enterprise, there would have to be a market need for it. So if on one hand we saw a big demand coming from the customer base for it, that could certainly drive adoption and support for an additional off-chaining feature.
Totally makes sense.
And ideally, if you were from another entity that has that, and you had a customer in mind that said, look, here's a customer, we could approach them together and have the customer support that effort. And that's kind of the ideal scenario for all parties, certainly for us as well as the off-chaining provider.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's important to say that SIMBA is agnostic to all the technology. They are doing a great job. We in IOV Labs, RSK, and RIF, we believe interoperability between blockchains is super important. Like it looks like it's the future, but it's the present, right? We in IOV Labs aim to collaborate with other blockchains. So this is the reason we have Bridge and other solutions that it's important to say it. Let's see if there is any other questions. Yeah, I have a question. As a developer, what would be the first link that you will recommend to the developer? Like, I don't know, like we have a quick start. Can you share with us in the chat what is like the best place to start?
Yeah, I'm going to go to simbachain.com. And when we go out to simbachain.com, what we actually have is we have a few resources available to you. The first one that I'm going to show you is really more of a quick start, and that's going to be just going down here to the Build Your First App. And if you go into there, there's about, I think it's 9 steps, but it's basically the same thing that I walked you guys through today. And you would actually be basically building out that car application that I kind of demoed for you guys or showed you a little screenshot of it at the end. But this is what you would be building out, and it gives you all the steps to do that. So I think this would be a really good place to start if you just want to get your feet wet. If you want a more of a comprehensive deep dive into exactly what's going on with a smart contract and with all the cryptography and everything else, you may want to go in and take a look at our online e-courses. And if you go into our training portal, you'll be able to sign in. And we only have one course currently out, but that's been published. But we have a couple more that we're working on. One is going to be on RSK. So we'll be creating one with RSK and building out an RSK app. But the SIMBA 101, if you go into this first application, it's a self-based LMS. And let me go ahead and just start this out here. But this self-based LMS here, it's loading up. I have about, let's see, let's go to the introduction section. But when we look at this this here, we'll notice that it's got multiple chapters on blockchain foundations, what happens with a smart contract, basics of a smart contract, how SIMBA and smart contract as a service works, the data stores and their access controls, how do you get hands-on with SIMBA, some of the value add propositions that we have, and you really get more of a deep dive. So it really depends on what you want to do and what your palette is. If you just want quick, I want to just play with it real fast, then maybe take the quick start. If you want to spend 3 or 4 hours with it, then maybe go through the long version of the course and then do the quick start. So it's up to you, whichever one you want to do.
Yeah, and to which I would add the LMS course that we have available, the one we have available, and several others coming down the pipe, is similar to what Tommy just walked through, but much more detailed. And really walking through it, it's a couple hours worth. What Tommy what you just walked through was obviously not a couple hours worth. It was a solid summary. But if you really want to get into the details, this LMS course is a great place to go. Of course, in our documentation, the Build My First App is also a very quick way to get started on the actual pointing and clicking of the tool itself. And there are other pieces of documentation that you can review. You know, the SDK documentation that's there as well. That, you know, they can get, you know, more detail, especially for developers and more hardcore, more seasoned developers. So the documentation is pretty extensive that we have on that SIMBA Chain has, even what we've made publicly available, and the reviews we've gotten on them have been very positive. So I'd recommend, you know, don't be shy to go through that and explore it and see what you can find. There's a lot of great material in there. But the best two places to start is exactly what you mentioned, Tommy. You know, the Build My First App. We've gotten great reviews on that, and of course the LMS course.
Yeah, and one other place as well that'll be helpful for those of you that are developers and just want to get started is if you go into our documentation section, which is what Anjan was just talking about. This is where you'll find all of our SDKs. So for whatever platform you're used to working with, you can go ahead and probably get started with some of these, as well as you can look at some of the documentation for iOS or Android or whatever platform it is that you're working with.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, it's amazing. I really like that. Thank you so much. If there is not any another question, we can wrap up. We can say final thoughts. Do you want to say something, Tommy, Anton?
I appreciate your time today. I'll defer to Anjan to kind of close it out.
No, thank you all. Thank you, the team at IOV. It's been great working with you on this webinar. You've got a great community. You know, and your vision of bringing Turing complete to Bitcoin is really exciting and really important. So I know at SIMBA Chain we're really excited to support this, and would love to continue engaging and working with your community. I think this is a great launch to our collaboration.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much, Tommy and Anjan. I believe it's going to be the first of other series of webinars. Now that the community knows SIMBA, please, if you have questions, write down Tommy, but also, you know, we have our channels in Github or emails for developers at IOV Labs. I'm going to write down here. We are always in contact with the people who have questions, ideas, entrepreneur. Like, please reach out to us. We are going to be super happy to talk with you. And having said that, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time. Goodbye, and see you the next time.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Stay safe, everybody.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Weekend.
Bye. Bye-bye.
You too. Have a great weekend. Adios.
Adios.